Hi, my name is Dale Kirk. I work for Talos Training and Consultancy within our coaching practice. I'm here with my colleague, Doug Chapman, and what we'd like to do is do a short demonstration of how you can incorporate the GROW model into your coaching conversations. So Doug, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Dale.
What's the topic you want to talk about?
Well, within the next month or so, I'm going to be moving into a new role as a consultant. So moving from my current managed service account manager role back into a consultant role. So what I'd like to do is to maybe get a bit more focus as to a strategy, a plan of action for how I develop that role.
Brilliant, brilliant. So we've got about 15 minutes. What would be a clear goal from that subject for this conversation?
I guess really is to think about some kind of development path for me in terms of ensuring that I get the most job satisfaction out of my new role. So what's going to give me the biggest motivation, the biggest satisfaction, and how I set that action plan, if you like, in place.
Brilliant, okay. So satisfaction is obviously important to you, and we can look at that in more detail in a moment, but so for you to have a bit of a personal development plan.
Indeed.
Over what kind of timescale are we looking at?
Well, I would say, having done the role previously, I have an idea about what my strengths are and the areas that I need to develop. But also there's some key focus, I guess, that I want to look at in terms of some of the language skills that I'm going to be using with certain customers. So I'm guessing we're probably looking at about the next 2 years to really put that plan in place. So I think it's a fairly long-term strategy.
So tell me a little bit more about the situation. You said you want to get the satisfaction from the job, so that's important to you. Tell me a bit more, what's the reality you're facing with this change to the role?
Well, having been away from a consultant role for the last 3 years or so, I guess there's going to be a challenge in coming back to a department that although I know people, clearly I'm going to have to, if you like, build some relationships again with people. So that's going to be not necessarily a challenge, but it will be something new for me and an exciting venture. But I think secondly as well, I need to understand more about the customers that we work with as a consultant, as opposed to what I've done for the last 3 years in terms of the managed service. Okay. And I also think I need to be clear as to what kind of delivery and consulting work that I end up doing, so that, as we've talked about, I maintain that level of job satisfaction.
Okay.
So when I was a consultant previously, I used to do lots of different projects, but some of the projects would be very similar over a long period of time, which didn't necessarily give a high level of job satisfaction. So for me, it's about working and picking and choosing and working on the right kind of projects to maintain that level of motivation. So
let me just play that back to you if I can. So you're saying there's aspects of re-establishing relationships.
Indeed, yeah.
I'm interpreting slightly here, but re-evaluating how you view customers and your relationship with customers? Indeed, yeah, to a degree, because there'll be new customers that I may have worked with, but probably won't have worked with as well. Okay. A sense of looking back on what your strengths are and also looking forward to have a view of what you want this role to be for you. Definitely. I think that's probably the most critical aspect of what I'm going to be going back into. And how does that tie back with the goal of you having a plan? Well, I think that's probably the most critical factor is the relationships I can build over time. I think looking at the strengths and working on the areas of development are going to be important, but I think for me it's to truly identify, in conjunction with management and fellow consultants, what are going to be perhaps the key customers, but also the key projects, consulting projects, training projects, that are really going to deliver that level of job satisfaction for me. If you were to give yourself a score out of 10 for how clear you are on that aspect now, what would you give it? Probably about a 6, I would say. So if we were to be able to move it up the scale a little bit, that would be useful, presumably.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd like to, great if we could get it to a 10, but I think, even if I could get it up to, so I felt, at a level 8 out of 10, for example, I think I would be extremely pleased with that result.
Okay, brilliant. So we've got quite a clear goal, really. We're improving your clarity or helping you feel that things are clearer on the long-term plan.
Sure.
Okay. So you don't have to tell me what the answers are, but if I was to ask you, do you think you're aware of what your top 3 strengths are?
It's interesting because as an individual and the type of personality that I have, I don't tend to shout out about the strengths, so I tend to sort of be fairly reticent about shouting out my own strengths. But I guess if I was to look at that, I would say I think my skills at building relationships are very strong. Okay. So I think that's certainly a key element to that. I think I would certainly say my communication skills are strong, which links into the relationship building. So I think I've certainly over the last 3 years in managed services and account manager, I think my questioning and listening skills have certainly become far more pertinent and relevant and also useful as a consultant. And I guess as well, the other key skill that I bring to this particular role would be the language skills that I have. So as well as those key consulting roles I've talked about, skills I've talked about, I think as well, the language abilities that I have, knowing that we have customers that require either people to speak in those languages or to speak in English, and but be able to interpret and maybe translate certain pieces to delegates in the native language, I think is also a key strength, bearing in mind the more diverse and multinational we become as a company.
Okay, so there's relationships, there's communications, and there's language, which is really quite linked to communication as well. Okay. Would it be useful if we looked at some options on how you can get clarity of developing your plan?
It would indeed, yeah. Okay.
Great. So, obvious question. What options are available to get some clarity? If you were advising a customer, what would you do?
I think first and foremost I need to sit down as soon as I come back into the role. Ideally I'd like to do it beforehand, but with the amount of work that's still left to be done from a handover point of view, I think that's going to be challenging. But I think I need to sit down with my manager and also some of the team as well to identify the customers that we're currently working with, because that's not in my sphere at this moment in time. So to understand who they are, what their drivers are, also to understand a little bit more about where my skills could potentially be used with those particular customers. Identifying what current projects are in place, but also what opportunities may be coming up over the next few months. So I think, in terms of the communication and the relationship building, I think I would definitely like to develop in the area of coaching.
Right, okay.
So if there are opportunities to improve and develop my coaching skills, then that's something I would definitely like to get involved in. I think if there are some big consultancy projects as well, I think those are areas, because of the experience I've gained with the previous role, but also with the strengths that we've discussed, I think that would be a very good avenue to go down and not just do delivery, but to work on consulting projects from scoping all the way through to design and delivery and evaluation. So I think there's some key areas there that I need to look at. So certainly talking through that with my manager and with the team, but also doing some research myself into the opportunities that arise.
So it sounds like, kind of summarise that, it sounds like taking the time at the beginning to have the conversations with people to find out what's happening, where do your skills match, what are the opportunities.
Exactly.
So you said your goal was about a longer term plan, a 2-year plan,
Sure.
And what you're describing there sounds quite quick wins, almost, to use a phrase.
Yeah, I think they are quick wins to make a start into the, if you like, understanding where my strengths could be utilised in the shorter term. But I think in the longer term, things like developing coaching skills, that's not a short term aim. I think some of the projects that we get involved in are longer term anyway. So from my perspective, to really develop the skills, if you like, that I have, I think it will take a longer period of time. So whether that's to looking at qualification based approaches. So whether that's from a coaching point of view, maybe a consultancy point of view, to perhaps look at that longer term qualification approach. Stroke intervention might be thinking about it is probably a very appropriate way to take if you like, a longer term view.
Okay, so you're talking about, correct me if I misinterpret this, but you're talking about spending time with your colleagues, understand the situation and understand the customers, looking outside and looking at possible long-term development activities. For you to have clarity on what the plan is, what other activities would be useful?
Well, funny enough, I think these sorts of conversations are extremely useful as well. So to build some further clarity, to maybe speak to people who have been there, seen it, done it as well, I think is extremely useful. We're lucky.
What kind of people?
I would say people who have been in similar situations, who have moved from, it doesn't have to be exactly the same kind of role that I've done, but people with the business experience who have moved into more consultative type roles, where there is design and delivery clearly, but with work on consultancy projects, who have been there and perhaps made those transitions. So for me, because it is a transition period, it would be useful to speak to those people within the business and perhaps outside the business as well, who have perhaps recently, maybe let's say the last 5 years, have made the sorts of transitions that I'm going to be making within a month.
There's a thought going through my head, which if I can share it with you, and it may be useful, or feel free to reject it, but I'm thinking about, seems to be quite a bit of looking within the organisation and looking at the customers, but what about looking outside the organisation and in terms of developing the clarity of plan?
Yes. I mean, generally people tend to look inside, don't they, internally as opposed to externally, but there are people that I know, so friends as well, who not necessarily have done exactly the same, who don't work in the same sphere, but have made transitions from different roles, if you like, into very different roles. So I can certainly speak to them about how they've built their goals and built their strategy for their development for a period of time. But I think there's also, as we all know, wide range of resources available off the internet, for example, and videos, whatever it might be, development tools that could be used to help me look at those goals in more detail, I suppose, and give them more clarity. Okay.
So it sounds like, just to play this back to you, you're saying the conversations with colleagues, very beneficial, understanding the current situation, understanding the customers, understanding your skill set, looking at how that might feed into development planning.
Indeed.
I don't know if you're thinking about things like higher level qualifications, or just more bespoke development packages for you, but activities around that, and starting to look outside the organisation on some of the free resources.
Makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah, for sure.
Utilising your network.
Definitely.
Any other key options stand out to you?
Well, I think one of the things that I definitely need to work on, although I said that the language skills are obviously a great skill that I have. I think because I've not used them for some time, I think that's an area that, just to get that level of fluency back to where it needs to be, I think that's another option I need to do, is to practice wherever I can. So that's something that I'll do, with friends who I can talk to, who are native speakers. I think that's one way. Reading newspapers and watching news programs, for example. That's a simple way of doing that. So I think I definitely want to do that to build that kind of level of confidence back up again, I suppose, in using those. But other options, I think I would definitely, having had some pre-thoughts about it, but I think this conversation has given me some more clarity. I definitely want to do some more research into some qualifications,
Okay.
because I think that will really embed some of the practice that I've had. So, but it's been more informal practice in, say, things like coaching and consultancy, where I think it would be very useful to have a more formalised approach to it. To have a clearer understanding of some of the structures for conversations, and to really embed some of that learning. And I find that doing that in a very formal, structured way actually works really well for me. So, excuse me, I think that is something I definitely want to explore further.
Right. Seems like a great stage to kind of lead us into, as we almost close the conversation down, to look at are there clear actions for you to take away from this? We're having this conversation in August. September is coming up. A lot of qualifications and courses start in September. Sure. Are there deadlines or clear actions that you need to take?
Yeah, I think you're quite right. Qualifications do tend to start sort of September. Some of them may start in January, but the majority, because the academic year starts in September. So I think leaving here today, I'll definitely have a look at what options there are in terms of perhaps coaching and consultancy qualifications out there. We'll certainly be having development discussions over the next month or so. So I think that's a really good opportunity and the right kind of time to bring up what those qualifications are, having done some research, and to look at certainly discussing what opportunities there are in those fields. So I think that's an initial action that I need to take away from today, is to start doing some research into those areas.
Okay.
And then I think once I come back from holiday and start back into the new role, I think it's really a case of sitting down with colleagues, to re-establish some of those relationships, but also to start, really investigating the opportunities, the types of customers, and the development opportunities that we would have with particular projects. So that's, I think, the second action that I need to take.
And to be a little bit challenging here, those conversations with colleagues, are they just going to happen, or do you need to arrange them?
No, I think they do need to be arranged. It's very difficult, this being the busiest time of year, the last quarter of the year, to just have ad hoc, grab people on the off chance that they can have a conversation. So it will need to be booked in, I think, and make sure that what I get out of those conversations what I need to.
So we started by you explaining your transition in your roles, and part of the goal for this session would really be about you having clarity
For sure.
On your 2-year plan almost. You described some of your current status in terms of some of your skills. You've got good relationship skills, good communication skills, good language skills, and utilising those. And you've talked about some options and explored some options in terms of working with the team, understanding them, understanding the customers, understanding the situations and possibilities, looking outside the organisation, using your network. And sounds like there's at least 2 clear actions for you. One is to investigate courses. Second was to
book in meetings with colleagues to, as we said, to re-establish relationships, but also to to look at the opportunities and understand a bit more about some of the projects that we're doing at this moment in time.
So, in relation to this conversation, is there anything else that you'd like to discuss relevant to the topic? Or?
No, I think that's given me certainly some very clear short to mid-term goals that I need to be looking at. From a longer term perspective, I think that's something that will come with time.
Right.
So once I've had some of those conversations and done a bit more research into some of those professional development opportunities, I think that's when I can start to think about a slightly longer term strategy.
And do you feel more confident about your clarity of plan?
Yeah, definitely. I didn't really have much of a plan. I think it's like things get very busy and you don't necessarily have time to think about what you're going to do moving forward. So this has been very useful from that perspective.
Good. Well, Doug, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Doug.
And have a good rest of the day.
I will do. You too.
Cheers.
Thanks.